Jesus was sent to this world to earn forgiveness. His parables are relatable stories that help us see our need for the forgiveness that he brings. The interesting thing about the parables is the many different layers of these stories. Join me in the next few minutes to dive into the parable of the prodigal son. You can find it in your Bible in Luke chapter 15. It's probably Jesus' most famous story. It's hardly in need of an introduction. It also happens to be one of Jesus' most misunderstood parables. Most assume it's a story about a wayward son and a loving, forgiving father, representing, of course, sinners like us and our loving Father in heaven. That's obviously one of the primary themes of the story, but it's a mistake to think that this is only the story of one son. It's really the story of two. The dictionary defines prodigal as someone who's characterized by reckless or wasteful expenditure. While it's appropriate to call the youngest son a prodigal, it might be even more fitting to call the father a prodigal, given his lavish spending. He both gives his youngest son his inheritance early, and then he spends even more on the feast to welcome that son back. Jesus is bringing our attention to the prodigal nature of the love of God the Father. Although we continually sin against him, his arms are always extended toward us, ready to lavish the unending grace that he offers upon any sinner who comes home. This is the story about two sons, both equally lost, both equally estranged from the Father. The youngest son's lostness is pretty evident to us. But if we pay attention to the end of the parable, we'll see that it's the other son, the obedient son, who's not at the party. There really are two ways of being lost. Younger brother types are the ones our society typically recognizes as sinners. They live wildly and by their own rules. Older brother types try to live as obediently as possible, following all the rules to a T. Both have one thing in common. Neither loves the Father, but only the Father's stuff. They simply have two ways of going about acquiring his stuff. One by living their own way and breaking all the rules, and the other by following all the rules. As the older brother says to his father at the end of the parable, "Look, all these years I've been slaving away for you, and I've never disobeyed your orders, but you never spent money on me or throw me an expensive party like this." What I don't want you to miss is that this elder brother is upset with his father, and there's a reason for that. In the societies in ancient Near East, the oldest born son was the one who would receive the bulk of the inheritance. In fact, at least 2/3 of all the father's property would go to the eldest son upon his father's death. Here's the problem. The younger son in this story would have received 1/3 of his father's estate when he demanded it early. But here's what doesn't sit well. if the father welcomed his younger son back into the family with a new robe and a ring and a feast with a fattened calf, whose inheritance is the father now spending? The youngest brother has spent his third. The only things that are left belong to the older brother. This party is being thrown at the expense of the elder son's inheritance. The inheritance he's worked for his entire life. The father even points this out to the elder brother when he says, "My son, everything I have is yours." In Luke 15, Jesus tells 3 parables back to back. In each story, something is lost: a sheep, a coin, and a son. But there's a difference between the first 2 and the third. It goes, someone goes out to search diligently for what is lost in the first 2. But by the time we get to the third story, we hear about the plight of the lost son. We're fully prepared to expect that someone will set out in search of him. No one does. The question remaining for the listeners then is, who will search for the lost son? Do you remember Cain and Abel? Another story of 2 brothers that didn't work out so well for one. In that story, the message is clear. You are your brother's keeper. All of Jesus' Jewish listeners, as he was telling this parable, would have known that it was the job of the elder brother to go looking for the younger brother and to bring him back home, even at enormous cost to himself. But in this story, he doesn't. This points us to the true older brother who did not stay home in comfort with the Father. In fact, he left heaven even though all that the Father had was his. The true older brother came after the lost sons and daughters and did so at an enormous cost to himself. Jesus paid the price for our being welcomed back into the family of God the Father. Jesus is the true older brother, and he is his brothers and sisters' keeper. Out of the ashes, we can be called sons and daughters of God the Father only because of Jesus' sacrificial death on our behalf. In Jesus' parable, there are 2 sons, both equally lost and estranged from the Father. But Jesus is the older brother we needed, who came looking for us in order to bring us back into the family of God. Welcome home.